Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. This is the History Reading Challenge tag. I caught this the other day on Justin, Ghost Reader, his channel, and I really enjoyed the video. He and I had a common textbook from when we were in school, which I thought was a fun connection. And then I caught a couple of other videos, but Alan Brassel was kind enough to tag me in this yesterday. And it's been a busy 3 days of virtual learning, so let's jump into the past. Prompt 1, what first got you into history? So curiosity, just being interested in different cultures, places I'd never been, places maybe I could never go to, cultures that might no longer exist. One of those was, the culture of ancient Greece and the Greek myths. And these fascinated me. They were so interesting. They were so weird and wild. In order, did any of this happen? If so, how much of it? We had famously the bull jumper in Crete. Okay, was that linking to the Minotaur and the Labyrinth? And so I was just really curious, and that got me into reading things like the Greek historians, Thucydides, Herodotus, Xenophon's Anabasis. I knew who Cyrus the Younger was at a fairly young age, and this made me very cool among my peer groups at school. But other connections, my grandfather, the personal connections. So my grandfather was 9 years old when the Nazis overran the Netherlands. So he lived through World War II. My great-grandparents, his parents, were part of the Dutch resistance. So reading about World War II, it felt like there was a personal connection. But I would add, my father did a nice job of helping me push out of strictly like Eurocentric historical reading. And one of those were like the slave narratives. So I read Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, the narrative of Frederick Douglass, the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, even the autobiography of Malcolm X when I was fairly young. And that kind of helped me start to appreciate that there's not just like this one narrative within history. That there's a lot. There are billions of humans and they all have stories. And their stories should be heard and appreciated. So the other one that I really think is interesting is sort of the history of human thought. So how human thought has changed around the topic. Stephen Jay Gould does a good job of writing about this within scientific topics. So he'll take a topic and explore how human thinking around the topic has evolved over hundreds of years. And he does a nice job of not presuming that someone from the past should have all of the same facts at hand that he does. Instead, he'll say, okay, these are the facts this person had. Based on that, this was a good scientific hypothesis and this person sought out evidence for it, or this was just a guess and here's why the person came with it. And he does a nice job of that in a very humane way. David Berlinski does the same thing with mathematics. He traces the development of mathematical thought in really interesting paths and with really interesting personalities. And he also does a really good job of giving credit to individuals who never held professorships or lectureships, including women who weren't allowed to hold those, but did huge amounts of research, particularly in this book, 1, 2, 3, on absolutely elementary mathematics and modern algebra. So those are just some. Oh, and National Geographic. Oh my gosh. They always had the historical articles in there, and they always had the great pictures and like the pictures of archaeological sites. It was fascinating, and the maps. And I'll talk about the maps again at the end. Loved those. So prompt 2, what is your favorite history book or author? I have 2. So I'm doing the Augustus Long read-along of Suetonius' 12 Caesars. I've read this a number of times. I really enjoy it. It scares the heck out of me. Most of these are terrible individuals, but it's fascinating. But then 1491 by Charles Mann is an excellent look at what was going on in North and South America up through 1491. And he really illuminates a lot of fascinating aspects of culture, of society, of innovation that occurred here in the Americas. And it's just so well written as well. And it serves as a good counter to books like History of the Conquest of Mexico and History of the Conquest of Peru by William Prescott, which very much views the destruction of those cultures kind of as a triumph. Like, look at us. Versus there were cultures that needed to learn from them. We can value their ideas. And that's important. That's an important component. I'm going to return to this book later on with a later prompt. So, prompt 3, what is your most anticipated history book you have not read yet? Fistful of Shells by Toby Green, which traces history in West Africa from the beginning of the slave trade to, I believe it's 20th century colonialism. I'm not positive on that. I'm waiting for it to arrive. And I'll talk about another book that links to that. Prompt 4, what is your favorite time period and why? Do you have a favorite book that you've read about? I've read the most about classical Greece and Rome. I just was interested in it. Tom Holland's Rubicon traces the last like 4 generations of the Roman Republic. It ends with Octavian becoming Augustus after the Battle of Actium. And it's a fascinating look at just an outrageous grouping of personalities. It begins with the social wars and Marius and Sulla, and it goes through the final civil wars that lead into the Roman Empire. And it's written at a really galloping pace. And Holland has a number of books that I've enjoyed. Prompt 5, what time period would you like to learn more about? And this is one that I know there are being quality books produced. Fistful of Shells is one of those, and that would be more history around Africa. A lot of history in Africa looks kind of like The White Nile by Alan Moorhead, which is an interesting book, but you can look at the gentleman on this cover, and there were a lot of people who lived along the White Nile before anyone from Europe decided to try and travel up it. Who discovered the headwaters of the Nile? Well, some Africans who we don't know, but they should get credit for that. So that would be one I'm looking to learn more about. Prompt 6, who's your favorite person in history and what book do you or have you read about that person? I have 3, and I only have 1 book. But there's a narrative through these 3 individuals. The first person, it might be a collective, a group of individuals, is mentioned in 1491 by Charles Mann. I said I was going to come back to this. And that's because somehow, someone or some group of people figured out how to bioengineer the corn or maize that millions of people eat every day. I love corn on the cob. My daughters love corn on the cob. Like, we love this stuff. Somebody figured out how to do that. Somebody figured out how to, bioengineer that crop, and scientists can't reverse engineer it. They can't figure it out. They can't look at existing wild types and figure out how they managed to get corn to grow. Somebody did that. To me, that's a top 5 scientific achievement of human history. I want to meet this person. We don't know who it was. We don't even necessarily know where it occurred in Central or South America. We don't know if it was a man or a woman. I would love to learn from that person. That person was a genius. The second person is the first person to eat cooked meat. I don't know who this was. I don't think any of us know who this was. I have a theory, though, that this was a clumsy person, because no other species cooks its meat. There was a clumsy person who tripped and dropped the day or week's meat in the campfire. And, maybe it was just an individual portion. I prefer to think it was an individual portion. And then couldn't trade it with anybody, because they probably thought it was poisoned. It had been burned. And so that person just glumly ate the meat and realized, whoa, this is better. And the next night or next week did the same thing, and again. And finally, they're like, yeah, you're just doing that to cover up the fact that you can't walk around the cave, without tripping like the rest of us. And then there was a first follower who also tried to say, wait a second, everybody, this is better. Do this. I'm having my kids eat the cooked meat. So I would just love to have been there when that happened, and just that would have been so cool. I would love to meet that person. Thank you for tripping. And the third one, and this is again someone lost to history. At some point, people started realizing they could overhear their own thoughts. They could think out a problem or think out and predict how a conversation was going to go or a scenario was going to go, and they could think through that in their own mind and overhear themselves. And this, of course, is something that we see all the time in literature. And we encourage children and young adults and adolescents to do this. Think before you speak, all of these types of things. I want to meet the people who first realized they could overhear their own thoughts and use that to learn or to predict ideas. I think that would be amazing. Once again, these ideas make me very popular among my peer groups. Prompt 7. What history topic would you like to see more fiction and nonfiction about? It would absolutely be North and South America and, pre-15th century AD or Common Era. Prompt 8. What non-book resources do you enjoy when learning about history? I'm fortunate in that I live in Arizona, so I get to go to archaeological sites with my kids and go see them and see really interesting ways they created to stay cool during the summer or warm during the winter with just basic convection principles and really interesting things like that, the cliff dwellings. And I'm always fascinated by them. And so that's my number one. Maps. Do we include maps? I think maps are fascinating. I was fascinated by maps as a kid. My 4-year-old daughter is fascinated by maps. We look at them all the time and have conversations around them. And then there are some documentaries I enjoy. There are also YouTube, like bite-sized documentaries that I find are very helpful and enjoyable. You know, when I am not watching BookTube. Prompt 9, a favorite quote or fun fact. I've got 3. Number 1, the best stomachs are not those which refuse all food. That is, I believe, a paraphrase of Plato by Voltaire, suggesting that, you know, maybe take some stuff in, learn, internalize others' thoughts. Second one, it is Changes of All Kind Which Arouse the Understanding of Humanity by Hippocrates. I love that one. And then a third one is we should never let the fear of Pandora's box cause us to eschew the fire of Prometheus. And that's from Jack. Prompt 10, shout out to BookTuber you enjoy who also reads history. I don't think he's been tagged on this, which shocks me. But if he has, I apologize, but I'm going to tag Bill Rutenberg, who teaches history. Thanks, everyone.